Hello and welcome to Psychgeist, where we talk about the psychology of the era, the science of games. I am your host, Dr. Rachel Kowert, and on today's episode of Research Review, we're going to be looking at a 2020 study entitled, Video Gameplay is Positively Correlated with Well-Being. Sounds like something right up my alley. As I've noticed before in previous videos, particularly the one about moral panic, people are, panicked when it comes to the effects of video games and how they may negatively impact players, particularly in relation to their well-being. Well, game studies as a field has been exploring the links between video games and negative outcomes, including aggression, addiction, well-being, and cognitive functioning for decades. Reliable, reproducible, and ecologically valid studies are few and far between. That is, quality science is hard to find. And while the focus on the negative has dominated the field of game studies since its inception, the researchers note in the introduction that there has been a bit of a shift in the research community and from policymakers towards looking at the potential positive effects of games, in particular in relation to games and well-being. However, one of the primary challenges of looking at the relationships between gameplay and well-being, or gameplay and mental health, or gameplay and the outcome of pretty much any outcome measure, is the heavy reliance on self-reports of video game engagement. That is, the reliance on participants to report how often they play video games and using that metric as a measure of engagement. Historically, self-reporting one's video game play use or video game involvement has been the standard because it's a relatively easy way to collect data and often the only way to collect data if the game industry is not collaborating with you, which historically the video game industry has been hesitant to do with social scientists. This is unfortunate because we know from research that self-reports of digital behaviors are notoriously inaccurate, which limits the conclusions we can draw from research that is based on these self-report measures of time spent. This has been a significant limitation in this area, one that is overcome in this study. In this paper, Johannes and colleagues assessed the relationship between video gameplay and well-being in a unique way by analyzing players' actual play behavior through a collaboration with two large game companies, Electronic Arts and Nintendo of America. In this study, Johannes and colleagues surveyed players of Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville and Animal Crossing New Horizons, my favorite, and logged their well-being, motivations, need satisfaction, and logged play game data. Well-being was measured using a validated scale of positive and negative experiences, which measures the affective dimension of well-being, the emotional dimension of well-being. Respondents were asked to think about how they'd been feeling in the last 2 weeks and report how often they experienced 6 positive and 6 negative feelings on a scale from 1 to 7, 1 being rarely or never, 7 being very often or always. The researchers then took the average or the mean of the positive feelings and the negative feelings and subtracted the negative from the positive to obtain an average score of well-being. The researchers also measured the experiences and motivations with the player experience and needs satisfaction, or PENS scale. Respondents were asked to rate items on 5 different subscales: a sense of autonomy, a sense of competence, relatedness, enjoyment, and extrinsic motivations on a scale of 1 to 7. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Whether or not they had felt these things, whether they had experienced these things while playing either Plants vs. Zombies or Animal Crossing. You may recognize those first 3 items, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, as the 3 components of self-determination theory. The researchers also took a self-report of playtime from the participants that they could then compare to the data provided by Electronic Arts and Nintendo of America. Results. In regards to playtime estimates, on average, players overestimated their gameplay time by 2 hours, further supporting the idea that we are terrible estimators of the time we spend playing games. In terms of well-being, the relationship between playtime using the server data and well-being was significant and positive. What's interesting here is when they used the self-reported estimates, these relationships were still evident for Animal Crossing, but not Plants vs. Zombies, further reiterating the importance of objective playtime data. The researchers also analyzed the potentially moderating roles of need motivations, that's the PENS scale we talked about, and their relationship between playtime and well-being. They hypothesized that the relationship between game time and well-being might vary according to how players experienced play. If they were intrinsically motivated, if their need satisfactions were being met, they would expect a more positive relationship between playtime and well-being as compared to players who experienced less intrinsic motivation or had lower need satisfactions met. However, this isn't quite what they found. The results indicated no consistent pattern in the moderating roles of motivational experiences on how game time related to well-being. For example, the more experiences of autonomy a player had, the more positively their game time was related to well-being. However, this interaction was not significant in either game. However, experiencing autonomy and a sense of relatedness did emerge as a consistent predictor of well-being, and extrinsic motivations to play as a negative predictor. Taken together, these results suggest that players' in-game motivational experiences can contribute to affective well-being, but they do not affect the degree to which game time relates to well-being. So what can we conclude from this? Contrary to the fire and brimstone we often hear when we talk about the impact of video games on well-being, the researchers found a significant positive relationship between playtime and well-being outcomes. Players who played more in the last 2 weeks, as told by objective server data, tended to experience higher levels of well-being. These findings support previous work that has also emphasized the benefits of video games on mental health. Even though the researchers found a small positive relationship between game time and well-being for both games, they did not find evidence that this was moderated by need satisfaction or motivations. The researchers strongly emphasized that despite the fact they found a positive relationship between game time and well-being, it remains an open question whether or not that effect is large enough to matter for people's subjective experience. But here's my favorite part. Quote, "Although our data do not allow causal claims, they do speak to the broader conversation surrounding the idea of video game addiction. The discussion about video games has focused on fears about a large part of players becoming addicted. Given their widespread popularity, many policymakers are concerned about negative effects of game time on well-being. Our results challenge that view. The relation between game time and well-being was positive in 2 large samples. Therefore, our study speaks against an immediate need to regulate video games as a preventative measure to limit video game addiction. If anything, our study suggests that play can be an activity that relates positively to one's mental health, and regulating games could withhold those benefits from players." So nice when other work corroborates the work that you do. Love it. Love it. So this work is so good. I mean, no surprise that I would love this study. Anything that comes out of the Oxford Internet Institute is generally of a high quality, and when they have new publications, I immediately get excited. Of course, there are limitations to consider. The objective self-report well-being measures, for instance, I would have liked them to have been more specific measures of well-being, focusing on the things we've seen in literature, things like social anxiety, loneliness, and depression, rather than kind of this broad aggregate. But this does give us a good jumping off point to then do further research looking into these more nuanced findings and these more specific outcomes. This work is also just so important because it provides some clear evidence about the link between play and mental health in a positive light, and also highlights the importance of industry partners in social science research. We need more of them. If you like this video and want to see more, please like and subscribe. And until next time, be excellent to each other and always cite your sources.